Okay, a few things I wanted to go over about Marvel. Um, I think the hardest thing for people to wrap their head around with this case is the whole concept of value extraction. Um, so let's start with why I have Pretty Woman here. Um, a classic film, right? And I think the first thing you have to understand is um, what the job is of this character in the movie, right? His job is he's a corporate raider, and that's what's going on with the Marvel case. You've got two very confusing names here: one good guy, one bad guy. Perlman and Perlmutter. Perlman bad, Perlmutter good. Okay, so that's one confusing thing. Perlman is a corporate raider. What Perlman tries to do is take a company, sort of like this character from Pretty Woman, right? The Richard Gere character, and say, I'm going to find a way to get as much money out of this company as I can for myself. And I don't care about the long term value of the company. I'm going to find a way to bust up this company and take the pieces and make more money from the pieces than what I put into it. And so if there's carnage left over, who cares? Um, so, and of course, there's no Julia Roberts character here to sort of turn him around. Okay, so Perlman and Owen, by the way, Carl Icahn, both two of the biggest corporate raiders from the era, um, were at one point or another had control of Marvel. And if you're interested in this kind of thing, there was a book from the 90s that was written about this called The Predator's Ball. A lot of the tactics that Icahn and Perlman used in taking over companies and milking them for money is now illegal. But this book kind of goes through this whole time and this whole meme that was happening with how these guys were taking over money with other people's money, taking over companies, I should say, with other people's money, and then milking them for themselves. So let's start with some of the financial engineering part. He sold $700 million dollars of junk bonds. Okay, so what are junk bonds and why is this a problem? Um, One is junk bond. Look, let's start with this. If I sell a corporate bond, I give you an interest rate for the amount of risk that you're taking. If I have a particularly risky situation, I'm going to have to pay you a lot more in order for you to take on that risk. So if I have a very risky situation, you're going to take on a lot you're going to get paid a lot of money for that risk. So what Perlman does is he creates an entity called a SPAC, um, and he sells a bunch of bonds and says, from this special interest corporation that we're going to use to buy this other company, Marvel, I'm going to sell you bonds. I'm going to sell you $700 million of bonds, and I'm going to give you a very high interest rate, like say like 12%. And you'll say, 12%, that's better than the 3 or 4 or 5% that I'm going to get in the bank. Yeah, I'll go for it. So you give the guy the money. And then you go out and you buy Marvel. And with the money with these, with the money that you got from the bonds. And then what you do is you merge the two companies together, keeping the Marvel name. So now you have this new company. So company A, company B, you move them together to company C, but you keep one of the original names. Okay? So you got the new company under the Marvel name. The new company now has all the debt from the bonds. So now Marvel is left with the debt from the high rent bonds that was used to buy them, right? Oh, and the part of this process is he pays himself a $30 million payment because of for doing the financial arrangements to pull the whole thing together. Then he borrows another $600 million and pays himself another $300 million out of the sale of this for arranging this. Then he sells 40% of the stock to the public, and he gives himself a $70 million bonus for selling $40 million worth of stock. As you can see, this is or 40% of the company in stock. So you could see that this is kind of, and then a special dividend, $40 million. So he took hundreds of millions of dollars out of the company for himself. So value extraction is about Perlman, or someone like Perlman, taking the strategy of, I'm going to find a way to take money out for myself, leaving other people to hold the bag. Right? That's the value extraction part of this. And all the other things that were around Perlman that he was doing, like increasing the number of issues of comic books that came out, or changing the price of the comic books, or cutting the pay of employees, that was all just a way for him to find a way to milk a little more profits out of the company that he could siphon off to himself. It had nothing to do with creating value. And it also drove the company into bankruptcy, which he did not care about, because that was part of the original plan to begin with, was that he was going to find a way to take as much equity out of the company as he possibly could for himself. Okay. Now, if we look at Perlmutter, on the other hand, Perlmutter's job was trying to find a way to create new value in the company. And he brought in Peter Cumio to do that. Right? So Cumio has a very different perspective. But we're going to come back to Cumio in a second. Right? So let's talk here about Blue Ocean strategy. So part of the things that Marvel did was a very Blue Ocean sort of thing. And I'm going to leave you these videos to watch. I got a bunch of them here, but let's just talk about Blue Ocean strategy versus Red Ocean strategy for a moment. Red Ocean, so these are two alternatives according to these two authors who wrote this book. They're both, one is an American, one's Chinese. They both work in Paris at INSEAD. They said there's a difference here in market creation and market competing, right? If we're competing in the market, we're in a red ocean. We're competing in a market where we take for granted the structure of the market, we take for granted the way we have to compete, and we try to compete the same way as everyone else does in this segment. So an example in my mind of a red ocean product would be something like the cell phone industry, right? If you take a look at AT&T or Verizon or T-Mobile or any of the carriers that are out there, they all compete on two things. They all say, we've got a better network and we've got a cheaper price. Those are the two things that they compete on. And one tries to slightly outdo the other on these existing tactics with these existing customers. So this is a red ocean. The sharks are in the water. They're tearing at each other. There's blood everywhere, right? And you're fighting over fractions of a penny. Blue ocean, on the other hand, is a very different structure. In a blue ocean structure, what you're doing is trying to make the competition irrelevant. You're trying to be the only one who does what you do. And the classic thing that the authors of Blue Ocean Strategy talk about is a company like Cirque du Soleil, right? So Cirque does not try to be like any other entertainment company. They have sort of their own way of approaching the world. And you'd say, well, then they should be easily copied. Well, they've been around for like 40 years and no one's copied them. So obviously that's not the case. So, all right, so if we take a look at red ocean means we compete in existing markets, try to beat the competition, try to attract the same customers that they do, try to exploit the existing demand, try to make a value cost trade-off, okay? So maybe what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to differentiate by adding this additional value to it, but then the price is going to go up. Right? So I'm going to try to make more margin, or I'm going to try to cut these features out and try to give you a lower cost version of the product, right? So either one of two ways. Blue ocean strategy, you try to create uncontested marketplace, you try to make the competition irrelevant, you try to attract non-customers if possible. Not always the case, but Marvel they did. Create and capture new demand, break the old, value cost trade-off. You try to increase the value while maintaining the cost. And you have both differentiation and low cost. Right? Now the framework that we use to sort of help make this work would be this ERRC framework, right? This eliminate, raise, reduce, and create. So what are the things that we can eliminate that the customers don't care about? What are the things that we can raise that the customers do care about? What can we reduce that the customers care about, but maybe not that much? And what do we create that's different? All right, so that framework is very useful. So let's see if we can give you sort of an example of this. So let's take a look at citizenM Hotels, right? So citizenM Hotels is a hotel chain that caters to business travelers, specifically to business travelers. And I know a little bit about business travelers. I mean, I spent 20 years on the road and had over 1 million miles on Delta alone. I was in airplanes 3 or 4 days a week. So, I mean, I understand what business travelers care about. So let's take a look at the citizenM Hotel.
So the hotel industry is a really red ocean. The competition is fierce. People try to outdo each other. The industry is not very creative. The industry is very bland, and I think that's brands take down their name and logo and sell a property to another brand. So from a brand proposition, nothing changes. It's just the logo and the name. Hotel star classifications are really 5-star, and all the 5 stars compete in Red Ocean. All the 4 stars compete in the Red Ocean. All the 3 stars compete in Red Ocean. We knew immediately that, comparing ourselves or looking into the industry, we needed to do something completely away and break out and really create a blue ocean. The blue ocean thought that we created with that is how about creating our own classification? How about taking from 5-star what is important for a frequent traveler? How about taking from a 4-star, from a 3-star, and combining it so that the price is right, the location is AAA, and you feel comfortable and are serviced by great ambassadors. When we travel, there's a couple of things we want. We want an incredible king-size bed. We want a wonderful rain shower. We need to have a safe, we need to have Wi-Fi, we need to have certain comforts, and aesthetics are important. Our rooms are sufficient and small, but they do have all the important features, and those are the highest luxury. Historically, we travel to hotels also to get inspired. We have created, like we have at home, living rooms and comfortable settings. Guests first talk about the incredible architecture, about the art, about everything they see, but in the end, it's all about the ambassador. It's all about the personalized guest service that they receive. citizenM eliminated the front desk reception area altogether. Usually a big aggravator for people. You stand in line to get in, you stand in line to get out. Instead, we said, can we give control to the guest? And we've done so through kiosks, just like at an airport checking in for your flight. It's a quick in and out controlled, and we're able to check people in on average, including payment, under 3 minutes. citizenM eliminated restaurants because our locations are always AAA location in the metropolises, in the major cities. People want to walk out and choose their restaurant they like to entertain, they want to go out. In the hotel industry, you will find a doorman, a front desk clerk, a reservation clerk, a housekeeping this, a restaurant. So there's all kinds of different disciplines and staff. We just have one staff, ambassadors. Our ambassadors really do everything. They could host you as you check in. They could make an incredible barista make a cup of coffee for you. They could shake a cocktail for you. And you never know where they are, but they're always with you and around you. And that gives them a sense of pride. And the great result is that really because we have less ambassadors or need less ambassadors, it's about 50% of the staffing that a regular hotel needs. We've been able to be very efficient in our construction and bring the construction costs down. And with having more rooms because of the size in the hotel, we're able to share that with the guest. So if you look at 5-star pricing and our pricing, yeah, we're 30-40% cheaper than a 5-star hotel. citizenM opened in 2008 at the Amsterdam Airport, Schiphol. We have now opened 11 additional hotels, ranging from Taipei to New York, Paris, London. So we're rolling out. We have constructions going on in Boston, in Washington, Miami. 2 projects in Los Angeles, 2 projects in San Francisco, and 2 projects in Seattle. Citizen M achieves incredible guest ratings. We are at par or at times better than 5-star properties. With the occupancies that we run in the low 90s on an annual basis for the company, we generate quite some happy people. Our Citizen Blue Ocean approach really has set us apart from the industry. We have eliminated what the guests don't want. We have increased what they're looking for. Instead of competing in the red ocean of the hotel industry, Citizen M made the blue ocean shift. We created affordable luxury. We created our own territory. And as such, we have 5-star luxury at 3-star prices in a complete new environment.
Let me just sort of go over a couple of things here which are really, really critical to this. One is that another part of Blue Ocean strategy, which I really didn't talk about up until now, is that red ocean companies tend to take their industry structure for granted. They tend to believe that the way things are the way that they have to be. They're like laws of nature. And that's not the case. These were structures that were built by people to solve certain problems at certain points in time, right? And then maybe these solutions are no longer relevant. So for example, we're looking at this hotel here, right? So let's start with a couple of things. One is you'll notice that they don't have a front desk, that they have kiosks. Well, why would they do that? So let's go back to this EERC framework as we talk through some of these things. Why would they eliminate the front desk? Well, let's think about this. Front desks have been in hotels forever, and you just take for granted you have to have them. Well, no, you don't. They were there because back in the day, when I was first traveling, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, you check into a hotel, and what they had at the front desk was a file folder like this, like this one here, and it was. They opened up a file folder, and they made an imprint of your credit card. So they had a copy of your credit card, and they would put it into that folder when you first checked in. And then, as you began to go around the hotel and use services, they would put slips of paper into your folder. So you stop and have a cocktail that evening after you check in, and you sign your name at the bar, right? And they take a little slip of carbon paper, because you guys remember those carbon paper sort of receipts where you'd have 2 pieces of paper together and you'd sign the top copy, and maybe like a yellow sheet on the bottom would have your signature on it from the impression. So they'd take the carbon paper and they'd bring a copy of that to the front and drop it into your folder, right? Then someone would check your room the next day and find out you took some peanuts from the minibar, okay? And write up a little slip, goes in your folder, right? Maybe you have one morning you stop in and you have breakfast in the hotel lobby, and you have some eggs or bacon or pancakes, whatever, and they write up a slip and you sign it and it goes in your folder. So now when you check out, they open up the folder on the desk and they pull out a calculator. They go, okay, 3 nights of stay, a cocktail at the bar, breakfast one morning, peanuts from the minibar. Okay, your bill is boom, and then hand you the bill. Literally, that's how it was done. Well, you don't need that anymore, right? Everything's automated. You go to the bar, they put it into some sort of, guest automation system. It automatically drops something, and you can check out from your room on the TV or from your phone. You don't need to go to the front desk to check out. It's all there. It's all in the system, right? So why have this big piece of furniture taking up expensive real estate that you might be able to use for something more productive, right? So eliminate the front desk. Also, business travelers don't really like eating meals in the hotel. They would rather go out, enjoy the city, or meet with clients. So if you have anything at the hotel, it'd be very limited. In fact, you could even get food delivered, right? Just call DoorDash or something. So eliminate the restaurant. The food's never been that good anyway, right? And it's been an expense, you're not making any money on it. Eliminate that, right? What do business travelers care about? Business travelers don't really care how big the room is, right? that the room size is not really all that relevant because they're just going there to sleep. So maybe you reduce the size of the room. Now, if I reduce the size of the room, that gives me actually ability to create more rooms in the same square footage. So I have more inventory to sell. That's a positive thing, right? What do I raise? Well, what do they do? What do they care about? Well, they care about a comfortable bed, right? Because they're going there to sleep. So you raise the quality of the bed. Maybe you raise the quality of the Wi-Fi because they are going to need to check their email for work or whatever, right? What do you create? Maybe in the lobby where you got rid of that front desk, you create sort of like a living room type feeling where they feel comfortable when bringing a client over and having them sit around and shoot around a pool or have a cocktail or have a cup of coffee. So you figure out those things that mean the most, and you can restructure those things that don't make sense any longer. So eliminate, raise, reduce, and create. So I'm not going to have to go. I don't want to go through that endlessly, but and there's some different examples here of how that actually works. If we look at some blue ocean things for Marvel, what were some of the things that they changed that were dramatic? Well, first off, do they, when they make movies, do they have the same budget level that they would in a typical Hollywood studio? And the answer is no. They've got like 3% overhead, while the average movie had like 30% overhead, right? So literally like 1/10 the amount of overhead. They focused on the character instead of on the actor, right? In the beginning, Robert Downey Jr., who's a great guy, he's had a checkered past, he's had his challenges. You wouldn't have hired him, right? For a lot of studios, because you would have looked and said, well, the man has had his issues. He's been in and out of rehab. He's had, he's been in prison. He's had some issues. And he could, eventually fall off the deep end again. And what would happen to us? Well, they said, no, it's about the character. He's a good actor. We can probably get him for cheaper than we can get other good actors. So hire the guy. If he falls off the deep end, we'll replace him, because it's about the character. It's not about him. And if you say, well, how can it be about the character? Look at the James Bond series, right? How many James Bonds have there been? And some of them are good and some of them are bad. But it's, if you don't like the guy, they fired him and brought in another guy. So you can do that. So they cared more about the characters, which were the important part of the story, and the actors not so much, right? Let's take a look at some of the things that Kumio did. Now I'm going to go through these quickly because Kumio, these are very short videos of him, so I'll maybe do a couple and then we'll talk. So let's do this. We'll start with this.
Our guest today is Peter Cuneo, who successfully led 7 turnarounds, including Remington, divisions of Clairol, and most recently Marvel. Peter, talk about what it was like when you took over as CEO of Marvel.
We had 2 problems. The first was financial. We actually at that time had $250 million in debt, and the interest rate now was 12%. So we had to generate at least $30 million in cash to cover the interest, which we couldn't do emerging from bankruptcy. The second problem that we had was that a lot of our business partners, a lot of them had lost money during the Marvel's bankruptcy process. And you had to convince them it was not easy to become your partners again after they'd lost money with you.
So what did you do?
First, we adopted a licensing model. We wanted to conserve all of our cash, conserve all of our capital. So basically, we didn't want to write too many checks. We wanted to get checks. The second thing that we did is we decided to make motion pictures the major means by which we were going to promote our comeback and rejuvenate our characters.
Peter, given where we are in the world, what's the one talent that's most important for CEOs?
Well, Robert, we have upheavals right now economically, we have upheavals militarily, we have natural disasters.
We have, it seems like political problems everywhere in the world, and successful leadership will again be the ones that are capable of making change, positive change. So I still think that the most important skill, if you will, for any great leader is courage. Courage to make decisions that will be unpopular. One of the problems we have in the U.S. today is our political leadership is unwilling to be unpopular. We look at polls every day. There's a new poll saying what people think, and the political leaders change their positions weekly on topics. And we simply can't get together on anything, and this is because we simply don't have, in some cases, the right leadership, the right mentality. People who don't care about getting reelected.
Okay, so let's just sort of talk about these first couple that we just went through. In fact, well, let me play the one more here. We'll play this one too.
Welcome back to the CEO TV show. I'm Robert Reese, your host, and we're speaking with Peter Cuneo, who has led 7 successful turnarounds. Right now we're talking about Marvel. Let's talk about your core customers.
Well, we have a multitude of customers, of course. We have consumers, we have moviegoers, we have retailers who we sell products to who are our customers, and so on. The way to really keep them all happy, ultimately, the single way to keep everyone happy is to continue to produce great content. And that was the only thing that would keep me up at night, that we'd have great content. So content
Great content is the key.
is the key. So in media, content in this case might mean the script for a film. It might mean the layout for a video game. In consumer products, it might mean the industrial design for a toy, and so on. As long as we are continuing to make high quality products, whether they're in media forms or consumer products, we would keep our customers happy.
How do you know that content is great versus good?
One way you hope to ensure that is you simply don't compromise.
Okay, so let's go through some of these for a moment. All right. Number one, they were $250 million in debt. So this is a residual of the bankruptcy that they were driven into by Perlman. Perlmutter bought the company out. Perlmutter threw a bunch of money into it, but they were still $250 million in debt when Cumio came on board. Now, so Cumio had to find a way to quickly change things, and that's his job, right? He's a turnaround artist. He's the guy who gets brought in when other people have failed to make this work. If you're $250 million in debt, you've got a series of challenges, especially if it's at 12% and you got $30 million of carry on that debt. Because you're not going to be able to get a lot of loans and things like that. People aren't going to trust you very much. And in fact, he even said they burned a lot of the people, a lot of the vendors and partners that they would normally work with in the bankruptcy. People who have loaned them money or given them materials, and all of a sudden they're talking about paying them pennies on the dollar to get out of debt. So, really bad position to be in. So he said that we're in this position. What's one thing that we could do to sort of get us out of this situation? And this might be licensing. Now, what is licensing? So, I own intellectual property. I have the rights to, in this case, something like Spider-Man, right? And so a company approaches you and says, we want to make little Spider-Man dolls. Great. All right. This is positive because you don't have to have a warehouse to hold these dolls in. You don't have to pay for raw materials to manufacture these dolls. You don't have to pay for equipment or manufacturing. You don't have to pay for any of these costs associated with actually producing and selling the dolls. You're just going to get a check for saying you can use this image. You can use this intellectual property we have. So maybe the doll's $10 and you get $1 for every doll they make. Fantastic, right? Yes and no. Yes, it's a good way to get quick cash, right? And it's not bad because you're not having to put up anything at risk other than the intellectual property itself. Why is that a risk? Well, because someone could begin to make Spider-Man do things that were un-Spider-Man-like. Like maybe Spider-Man starts wearing a tutu, or maybe Spider-Man decides to mount horns on his helmet. Whatever it is, right? That they decide is out of character for Spider-Man could maybe hurt the intellectual property of Spider-Man. So that's a problem. Another problem is you got to trust the partner that you're dealing with, besides just how they're going to treat the characters. The character going to be in character. For example, this toy manufacturer tells you they're going to make $1,000 and sell them only in China, and you'll get a dollar for each dollar. They're going to make $10,000 and you get a dollar for each dollar. Great. Except you leave your office here in New York and you go down the street into Chinatown, and all of a sudden you find thousands of these dolls everywhere on the street corners selling for like a nickel a piece or $2 a piece. Wait a minute, I thought they were supposed to be $10 dolls. I thought I was supposed to be getting a dollar a piece. Come to find out that these guys have probably made millions of them. Have you gotten money on the millions? No, just the 10,000 they told you that they made, not the million they actually made. Oh, and by the way, since they made a million, they've kind of screwed up your ability to license that product again to other vendors. So if they originally did what they said, only going to sell 1,000 in China, you could have sold a license to make them in Europe. You could have sold a license to make them in the US. You could have sold a license to make them in Latin America, right? But now you can't do that because this vendor, this licensing partner sort of screwed up the deal. So licensing partners are, it's just like a marriage, There are good marriages, there are bad marriages. So you got to know who you're getting into this marriage with before you do, and do you trust them? All right, so that's one thing. So not a bad thing. Oh, and also let's talk about the other side of licensing. I said you get $1 per doll, right? But what if the cost of the doll is only about $2 to make, and you're selling them for $10 a piece? Wow, you could be making a lot more money if you took the risk of actually doing this. And so when we take a look at the movies, they actually licensed out Spider-Man to Sony to get some quick cash, right? They had to put in place, though, a creative committee that would watch and to see what Spider-Man was being used for in the Sony pictures and give them guidelines as to how they could and could not use the character. But then they said, now that we've got this cash, we're better off making the movies ourselves. We'll make a lot more money off of this and we'll have a lot more control, creative control as well as intellectual property control, if we do it ourselves. So they decided they wanted to do it themselves. Let's talk about courage for a moment and leadership. And we're going to get more into this with the last video, but Kumio is a turnaround artist. Why do companies need turnaround artists? Aren't the executives smart enough to know what's going on? And I think one of the things that you begin to find out is that they do, but they just can't go that mile to make some people uncomfortable, right? If you're going to turn around a company, there are going to be people who are not going to like what you're going to do, and you may have to sacrifice some people for the good of the rest of the company. You got good old Mary, and she's been this great warehouse operator for you. When you were small, Mary was there, and she started with you. But now you've grown to be 10 times the size you originally were. And unfortunately, as nice and as kind as Mary is, and even though Mary has invited you over to her house for dinner, and you've met her husband and her kids, and you like them all too, and they're all great people, maybe she's not the right person for this role any longer. She's no longer able to handle it. It's well beyond her personal capabilities, her personal skill set. So you might have to fire good old Mary, who's been such a great employee for so long. This is the kind of thing that has to happen, right? That these sacred cows and these people who have been longtime contributors may not be the ones who are the right people to take the company forward. Or you might take a look and say, these people aren't doing the job the way it can be done. I knew a young man who ended up working in Subway's headquarters. They're the the sandwich companies. They're a franchise company, and they're out of Connecticut here, and he took over running their warehouse for them, and guys who were in the warehouse, what they would do is they would send out stuff to the stores. Right, the stores would have under the franchise agreement, they would have to buy equipment from Subway. They have to buy clothing from Subway. They'd have to buy appliances from Subway, right? So Subway would supply them with all these materials, and he was in charge of the non-food stuff, right? The signage, the whole thing. So he got there and started looking at how productive they were, and they were miserably unproductive, right? And they were losing money through their warehouse operations, because they weren't really good at it. And he said, okay, so I'm going to go work in the warehouse. Maybe I'm just reading this wrong. And he would say, okay, how many orders does the average guy pick in a day? So like when you're packing a truck, if you're running a warehouse, you say, here's an order, pick this order, go through the warehouse and find these things and put them onto a pallet and shrink wrap them and get them ready to go onto a truck. How many orders like that does someone do in a day typically? And the guys he had working for him were doing 4 or 5 orders a day. And so one morning he decided to go work in the warehouse. Now, yes, he's young and athletic and all that. He did 10 orders in a morning. He did 20 orders in a day. They were doing 5. These guys freaked out. They realized that they were losing their jobs. Because very soon after that, he kind of gave a new plan as to how they were going to run this in the short term, but also said, hey, we don't even have the right infrastructure. There are third-party companies that can do this logistics better than we can, so let's close this down and actually offload it. Best move he made, but it made a lot of people unhappy, right? It was better for the company, but it got a bunch of guys fired who were sort of coasting for decades. So these are the kind of decisions you have to make if you're a turnaround artist. You have to go in there and say, I'm going to get rid of these people because they're just not doing the job the way it could or should be done. All right, let's just look at the last video quickly.
CKGSB, China's only not-for-profit independent business school.
My career has been in consumer products, media, and entertainment. So I can't speak for businesses that are highly technical in nature or highly dependent on technology. But in the businesses I've been in, it's almost always very poor leadership. Leadership that lacks courage. Usually the problem is that the leadership, for whatever reason, is just not unwilling to make the changes, the hard decisions, the hard changes that need to be made as a business and an industry and as competition evolves. You have to react. And for various reasons, they're just not capable of doing that. Either they don't understand the change, or perhaps it's frankly emotionally very difficult to make a lot of people unhappy. But making radical change in a business is all about, unfortunately, making other human beings unhappy. What I found in a number of my turnarounds, that one of the problems that existed was that these businesses, consumer products, media, and entertainment, are highly dependent on new products, whether they be media forms, whether they be hard consumer products, or whatever. You have to have a steady stream of innovative new products. But when you go to a company, you find out that no one wants to work in new products because they believe that it's very risky, that if you're not successful, you may not have a career very long at the company, yet you are highly dependent. It should be where your best people are on new products. And the way to change that is, first of all, you tell people it's okay to fail. But they won't really believe you until you start to back it up. One of the things that I used to do is when we had a successful new product, I would have an all-employee meeting and I would hand out checks to the team that worked on that new product. Now people start thinking, wait a minute, these people are getting checks for success. Yes, we've had some failures, doesn't seem like anybody's in trouble. This is actually the place you want to build your career. Obviously, you want to understand the business and the language of business. The blood flowing through the veins of a business are the numbers, are the financials. So So of course, you need to understand that. I hope you understand the business very quickly. But in turnarounds, you often find that the culture is completely wrong. I like to say the culture is bankrupt. The company may or may not be bankrupt financially, but the culture is bankrupt. It's typically a negative culture. It's one where the organization is used to losing, used to failing, used to underperforming. And you have to change that. You have to give the organization pride. And that takes time. And there's lots of ways to do that. One is simply be honest with the organization. Be consistent in how you communicate on what changes you want to make. And if you want to establish a new culture, back it up with your actions. Talk is very simple, but most of the employees will not believe you until they see you behaving in a way that suggests that you really will act on the kinds of things you're saying. One of the cultural changes I always like to make was to create an atmosphere where it's okay for people to admit they have problems, they have challenges. We all do in all our jobs. Absolutely. But we can solve them together in 99% of the cases, but we need to know about them. What used to keep me up at night mostly on these turnarounds was not problems I knew about. It was that I knew there are other problems that maybe I didn't know about. That's what would worry me. Well, I'm a very big believer in having active boards. There are a lot of CEOs who don't want active boards, and in fact, really don't want the boards to know very much about what's happening in the company. My attitude is very different. And we had a great board at Marvel, of very accomplished executives, both from the turnaround world, people who've been experienced turnaround people, but also from entertainment, and so on. And I felt we were getting world-class help for very little money. You don't pay the board anything close to what they're really worth. And so I wanted them to be involved directly with the senior executives. I was not worried about the board members interacting with senior executives. They were there to give advice, not make decisions, of course, for them, but to give advice, and that was very useful in difficult times when you're trying to turn around a company. So I'm a big supporter of very, very strong boards, which you don't always see, as you know, in public companies. We want the board to be very aware of what the problems are, what's important, what the problems are that we need to tackle. You want to have a very good discussion about strategy and an agreement on strategy going forward. And if you have a good board, you're going to get a lot of strong opinions. Some of them will differ with each other, and that's okay. I would much rather have people differing so that we can really think about the alternatives than have everyone agree with me. That is absolutely the worst possible situation, where everyone is just saying, yeah, oh, you're absolutely right on everything, and you know you're not. So I was dependent very much on the board for their very sage advice based on their experience.
Okay, so let's go through a little bit of that. Okay, so to start off with, poor leadership, we kind of covered that. I don't need to go over that again, but new products, right? And it's okay to fail. So if we are taking a look at a lot of companies, if you come up with an idea for a product and you try it and you fail miserably and lose the company a lot of money, could be career limiting, if not losing your job, right? Other companies that do good at new products, tend to have a very different approach. They tend to take a look at this as a learning process, and it's about process, not about outcomes. So you could have a product that failed and yet get a bonus. Because if you did it in the right way, if you had a good process, if there were things we learned or gained from this process, even though the product didn't take off, maybe we've learned something that we can apply to other products, to other situations. Maybe we can grow or gain from this. So the process and giving people bonuses when they're successful, and even when they fail, to say this was a solid try, will get people excited. We'll get people willing to take risks. We'll get people trying new things. And yeah, not everything will be successful, but as Michael Jordan said, you miss every shot you don't take. So yeah, you can. Or side note, let's just say that you need to take these shots, otherwise you'll never get anything done. Okay, culturally bankrupt, there tends to be this negative feeling that becomes self-perpetuating, and that's very hard to turn around. But you've got to, do things that give people a feeling that they're winning or can win again. It's okay to admit you have problems. I remember when I was a young man, I worked for a while for JVC as a product manager in the Japanese Victor company. And my Japanese boss, after my first meeting, I was very much an American junior executive. I went in and said, "Oh, I'm doing great. Everything's fine. Yeah, we're crushing our numbers." And he took me aside afterwards and said, "Tom, we hired you because you're smart. We hired you because you're good. Everybody has problems. We know you have problems, but unless you tell them to us, we can't solve them." And so that was sort of an eye-opener for me, because I've been part of those. I've been in other companies before where nobody would admit that, because it was like death to admit that you have a problem that you can't solve. But no, it was a very different approach, and a healthy approach. Because his point there about what I'll call the unknown unknowns, right? You have known unknowns. I'll start with known knowns. You know what's going on, you've seen it, you know what it is, you deal with it, right? You have known unknowns. If you're Samsung and it's September, you know Apple's about to come out with a new product. You know that, because Apple always comes out with a new iPhone every September. So you know they're going to do it. You just don't know what's in it, right? So that's a known unknown. An unknown unknown is 9/11. You didn't see it coming. It caught you out of the blue, right? That's an unknown unknown. COVID, an unknown unknown. We didn't know it was going to be as big as it was. And in fact, all along in the very beginning, remember they were going to shut down for 2 weeks, right? These are unknown unknowns. So you want to try to get rid of as many of those as you possibly can by being open about what's going on, by creating a culture of openness, a culture where people can talk truth to power, and you can, information flows freely both up and down the chain. So those unknown unknowns are things you have to get rid of. And the last thing is boards, right? And so this is something that a lot of people don't really understand. When you have if you have an effective board, it's a huge advantage to a company. Who should be on your board? Should be highly capable people. The two friends of mine who are on the most boards is one guy who used to be just retired from being the president of UBS Holdings North America, and he used to be the CFO of Bear Stearns, right? So if you had a banking or financial company, you'd want my friend Sam on your board. He will give you advice that you would not be able to get anywhere else. He would give you strategic perspectives that would be invaluable for you trying to figure out what you should be doing next, right? So, another person I have as a friend of mine, and she was the youngest senior executive ever at IBM. And she ran divisions for IBM, and she's gone on to take several companies public. And she sits on the board of a couple of software companies. And trust me, if you were in a software company, you would want my friend Ina on the board of your software company, because she's going to give you insights that you would get nowhere else. By the way, they don't get paid they get paid well, right? But considering that you're getting world-class intelligence from these people, you don't pay them enough. They could turn your company around overnight. So that's what you want from a board. But too many CEOs see the board as an impediment to their power. The board's going to tell me, no, I shouldn't do this, or the board's going to tell me, no, I shouldn't do that, or make it hard for me to do this or hard for me to do that. So I'm just going to treat them like mushrooms. I'm going to throw crap at them and keep them in the dark. So that's not the way you run a company. Anyway, I think we've covered a lot on this. I'm just around 50 minutes in this video, so it's probably way too long, but there's a lot in this case that I wanted you to sort of get, and I will see you in the next video, hopefully a shorter one.